It's time for Unit 7 of Environmental Earth Science here. This unit is explaining how ecosystems work, kind of building off last unit that defined an ecosystem and the parts of it, and also talked a little bit about species and the organization of life. We're going to look at a different way to classify life in this lecture, and also look at how energy moves through an ecosystem. If you want to find out more, you can find this in Chapter 5 of the environmental textbook. That's the one that you hopefully have downloaded already sometime at home. If you need the instructions again, please see myself or Mr. Hughes to get those. We are going to start off by looking at classifying organisms. Now, we classified them in the last unit in terms of evolutionary history and in terms of cell structures and everything. And we had the three domains, the domains archaea, bacteria, and eukaryota. And then we also had the kingdoms, which of the eukaryotic cells with nuclei, and those kingdoms such as the plant kingdom, animal kingdom, protist kingdom, and fungi kingdom. Well, in this unit, we're going to look at what organisms eat. And we're going to classify them by what they eat. And there are three types of consumers. Now, we'll talk more about another type of organism in a minute, but we're going to talk about consumers. Consumers eat other organisms. There are herbivores, which eat producers, and producers make their own food. So the herbivores eat the producers. Most of the time, producers are plants. All right. And then herbivores eat the plants. Carnivores eat other consumers. Omnivores, like us and bears and pigs and cockroaches, eat producers and consumers. They eat both. And finally, decomposers break down organic matter from dead organisms, or they break down organic waste. So here in this table, we look at what eats what in an ecosystem. We have the producers. Producers make their own food. We'll talk more about those as we go on. But if you notice, most of these grasses, ferns, cactuses, flowering plants, trees, most of those are plants. All right. And then consumers are things that eat the producers. And then the consumers go right into the herbivore, carnivore, omnivore, decomposer area. And you can kind of see examples of all this. A lot of this stuff should be review from probably a life science class you took, maybe 7th grade. I think a lot of this goes through, but we will build up to something a little bit more that we can sink our teeth into. We're kind of, between last unit and this unit, starting to lay the foundation and the groundwork for the next couple of units to come. So we're going to start, now that we've talked about producers, consumers, omnivores, herbivores, carnivores, all that stuff, talk about the energy itself. And what we notice is that life depends on the sun for energy. All right? Energy from the sun enters the ecosystem when plants use light energy. They do this in photosynthesis. All right? Now, we're not going to get too deep into it. You're going to spend an entire unit just on the process and the workings of photosynthesis in a cell next year in bio. But what we're going to talk about is we're going to look at carbon dioxide, water, and solar light or sun energy being used to make some kind of carbohydrate or sugar and oxygen. All right, and that is photosynthesis, and it's done mostly by plants, algae, and some bacteria. All right, and this makes the sugar molecules. It takes light energy and stores it into sugar molecules. So overall, this will store energy. Now, as you know, energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can just be converted. So we convert the light energy, the solar light energy here, into a chemical energy inside sugar molecules. And oxygen's a happy little waste product that we are very happy about. So as we're looking at this, all right, we look at the plants and they make their own food. We already talked about this. They're called producers. Also, a better name for them, or a name I like more, are autotrophs. It means they automatically make their own food. They auto for automatic. All right. And so the producer or the autotroph is any organism that can make organic molecules from inorganic molecules. Now, most of the time we think of plants and photosynthesis. In a couple of slides, we'll talk about a slight exception. And these are the autotrophs. All right, any organisms that cannot make their own food, cannot get these organic molecules from inorganic molecules, are organisms that need to eat other organisms. They are the consumers, and their fancy scientific name that I like a lot is the heterotroph. All right, and the heterotroph or consumer eats other organisms to get their nutrients. All right, most producers get their energy directly from the sun, and consumers get their energy indirectly by eating the producer. So again, it all leads back to the sun. The producers gather up the energy from the sun, convert it, and then things go and eat the producers to get at that energy. The major exception from this is in the deep, deep ocean ecosystems, where there's total darkness, so there can be no photosynthesis. And what we see here is certain bacteria use hydrogen sulfide, which you probably don't need to know the chemical formula, but it's H2S. It's similar to water. And so they take this hydrogen sulfide, usually from some kind of volcanic vent under the water, and create organic molecules using energy found in hydrogen sulfide. And then other organisms eat the bacteria, and you got what normally goes on everywhere else. Just the starting source of food is hydrogen sulfide instead of sunlight. Now, after you get this energy from the food, after you eat the food, all right, all consumers do this, and even the producers do this. They take some of those organic molecules they make, and they still have to do this process. All right, so what happens is we take the food, we take the carbohydrates, and we break them down to get energy, and this is called cellular respiration. And about this time next year, in 10th grade, you will start the cellular respiration unit in bio, where you really dive in deep. We are not going to dive in that deep because you get it next year. It's kind of just a little reminder that don't let this stuff slide away. And so cellular respiration, it occurs inside the cells of most organisms, even producers. All right, and those cells use oxygen and release the energy from food to a usable form. So cells use a sugar, glucose, which is a carbohydrate made by the plants, and oxygen to produce carbon dioxide, water, and energy in a form they can use. Because the cells can't use light energy to power themselves. They can't use the chemical energy exactly how it is stored in a sugar. They need to convert that stored energy into another form of energy. We're not going to go any farther than that right now. Next year, you'll really dive into that. So if we were to map out cellular respiration, a lot like we mapped out photosynthesis, here is your sugar. Here is your oxygen. They get combined and release energy. All right, there's the energy that's released. And they get carbon dioxide and water. And if you look at this, except for the type of energy, it is the exact opposite of photosynthesis. The only difference, besides we have the products of photosynthesis here, all right, are our starting reactants of respiration, and our products of respiration are our starting materials of photosynthesis. The big difference is the type of energy. All right, and all the animals and plants and cells and anything doing photosynthesis creates more energy than it needs, and so extra energy is stored as either fat or sugar to be used later. And then this type of energy here, the energy obtained, is used to carry out all life functions, to keep the organism or the cell alive. So it's a usable form of energy. So if we look at the energy throughout the ecosystem, we can follow where the energy goes. Now we all know that originally the energy comes from the sun. So we have the sun in here. All right. Let's draw the sun in. Hey, there's the little sun. All right. So we have the sun, and then energy goes from the sun and is taken up by the algae. The algae are your producer. Those algae get eaten by krill, which get eaten by a fish, the toothfish in this case. Those fish are eaten by a leopard seal, and the leopard seal are eaten by killer whales. And these are all consumers. All right, those are all consumers, and this makes up a food chain. It's the sequence in which the energy is transferred from one organism to another. And we'll go on about this. Food chains are kind of easy to follow. They all start at the sun, then we got a producer, and then a bunch of consumers. Sun, producer, consumer, 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 consumer. After that, follow the energy. Now, a normal ecosystem is not that simple. All right, now we can find our original food chain, and here it is. Right here, here's the food chain we saw on the last slide. But if you look at it, there are all these other interactions going on, all right? The algae can be eaten by small animals and one-celled organisms, which could be eaten by krill. Or the algae get eaten by a penguin, or the penguin can eat the krill. All right, the leopard seal could be eaten, or could eat an elephant, a baby elephant seal. All right, or maybe the killer whale, instead of eating the seal, the killer whale eats a different type of seal that ate the leopard seal, and so on and so forth as it keeps going. All right, it could be algae get eaten by the small organisms, get eaten by the fish, get eaten by a squid, get eaten by a killer whale. All the way, the squid could eat toothfish, toothfish could eat the squid, depending on the stage of life. So we got this big, complex series of food chains, which is known as a food web. It shows many of the feeding relationships in the ecosystem. So it gives you a better understanding of how the energy is flowing. It's not straightforward like that original food chain that's in our box here. There could be other interactions going on in a full ecosystem. The best way to look at this is by studying things called trophic levels. All right, and a trophic level is one of the steps in a food chain or a food web, or a level in a food pyramid, and we'll talk about food pyramids in a minute. So every time energy is transferred, some of the energy is lost. All right, and it's lost in the form of heat. I mean, energy can't be destroyed. It's not anything else, but whatever animal or plant, whatever organism is getting eaten, uses a bunch of the energy. And so less energy is available at higher trophic levels, and there tend to be less organisms at the high trophic levels than the low ones. And so we can see this with an energy pyramid. So again, this is probably something you've all heard of or seen in some way before. I'm hoping that a lot of it's not new to you. So here is our energy pyramid. Down here we have our producers. In this case, it's a bunch of grasses. All right, and there are many, many, many more grasses than anything above it. The grasses get eaten by a primary consumer, the first consumer to eat something, the first organism to eat another one. All right, in this case, we got grasshoppers. This picture's showing 6 of them. Those grasshoppers get eaten by these little birds, which are called secondary consumers. All right, they are the second level up from the producers. The producers are the base. The first level are primary consumers. Second level are secondary consumers. Think of it like a building, all right? We have our basement, which are the producers, where the foundation is. Then we have the first floor, then the second floor, and finally at the top we have our tertiary consumers. All right, and you could keep a pyramid going bigger and bigger. We had a smaller little food chain here. That are the tertiary consumers, the high-end consumers, the dominant apex predators of the ecosystem. They get the least energy because energy gets lost at each level. As you can see here, each layer of the pyramid represents one trophic level. And so what you end up seeing is the pyramid becomes smaller toward the top because there's less energy. The producers are the base where there's the most energy. And as you go up, the decreasing amounts of energy affect the number and organization of an ecosystem. So the energy loss influences and affects the number of organisms at each level. There are less at high levels in the period or pyramid. And energy loss limits the number of trophic levels. The more energy in the ecosystem as a whole will allow for more trophic levels in that energy pyramid. So this is kind of the basis of how the ecosystems work, how energy flows through the ecosystems. Producers create the food. They get eaten by consumers, which get eaten by other consumers that might get eaten by even larger, bigger consumers. And as you go on, most of the energy is lost from level to level. That's also it for Lecture 1 in Unit 7. If you have any questions, please bring them in, and have a good night.